So greetings, everyone. I wish this was not as wide as it is, but this says the Great Seal of the Iroquois Confederacy of Aborigine American People. This is our seal. So when you see the seal, you'll know what people this is associated with. Slide 2, or actually it will be the first slide considering. Great. Aborigine Americans hidden in plain sight no longer. And again, I already introduced myself, so we can skip that slide. Just want to give gratitude to the Aborigine American Confederacy and our many nation states. There are many nation states is what we refer to them all over the Americas. And we consider ourselves one nation with many people and many people with one nation. Next slide. So here, just to give a little insight. This presentation explores who we are as a people. It references what the word Indians in the Constitution means and excluding Indians not taxed, which is a particular section, Articles 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the Constitution. This presentation is going to talk briefly about our identity, lineage, cultural diversity, and our ancestral connections to the Americas. And the objective of this presentation is to engage the audience in exploring what our ancient ancestral history and cultural presence in the Americas and how it spans across the Americas up to what we call today North America. And upon exploring our story, I'm hoping the audience will glean into our culture of land stewardship. Throughout the centuries of various climate changes, we have adapted very well, and we've worked with the climate change as it occurred since for generations to come, or generations in the past and in the future. Next slide, please. Speaking a little fast to catch up. So there's an intentional effort to re-educate our people on our ancestral connections. We've been disconnected from them because of genocide and forced assimilation. So a lot of what we do as a nation is to educate everyone else who is not Aborigine, but those within our own people too, who have, lost a lot of our cultural connections and ancestral ways. And so that is the goal of our Confederacy, to do that. We align with our people and we encourage for the ancestral methods of land stewardship and land management. And we do that working with the city, working with the state, working with nonprofit organizations around climate change and biological, diversity, as well as cultural diversity. Next slide, please. There's some keywords for you to take away. Olmec, Mayan, Maya, Toltec, Aztec, Aborigine, American, Inca, Incas, Onque, Gaia-Caranoa, original beings, Indians, Constitution, American Declaration, United Nations Declaration, forced assimilation, genocide, dispossession, eugenics, colonialism and colonization, free and prior informed consent, treaty, language, and culture. Those are some keywords to just listen out for. Next slide, please. So the Incas are the Onques or Aborigine Americans, direct lineage, as we all are descendants of the so-called, and I say so-called to qualify that because we never called ourselves any of these names. Never will you see anything recorded in our Mayan glyphs or any of our artifacts that we refer to ourselves as names, but many people came to the Americas and referred to us as such. We did eventually adopt some of those terms too. And, that's what we call genocide and forced assimilation. A part of that situation is for Indigenous people to assimilate into being called a certain thing or into a certain culture. And so this presentation will help you to understand the type of discrimination that we've experienced here on our land. We've experienced dispossession of our lands and displacement of our people, as well as physical and paper genocide. That's a word I want you to keep an ear out for, paper genocide. We have been left out of the most important discussions and now we are asserting ourselves and we're asserting our ancestral culture into this narrative, right? By applying our traditional work within the changes of climate, within, land management and things of that nature. We have valuable cultural methods used to address our lands and our resources during this cycle that they call climate change, and we call it a climate cycle. All right, next slide, please. All right, so you'll see following in the painting that will proceed, that will come after this. It is in the Largo Museum in Lima, Peru, dated circa 1800. And this is an image of what we, or I would say our ancestors looked referred to themselves as. Now these paintings or other people painted pictures of us. I will say we did etchings and things of that nature, and we painted on stone. So when you see it on paper, most likely another some quote unquote explorer came upon the land and painted what they depicted us to look like. So next slide. Now, this is a picture of the quote unquote Incas, right? And the Incas were not kings. You'll hear this referred to as the Incas kings list. We never refer to ourselves as kings. We refer to ourselves as Incas. So male and female are both Incas. With the females or the matriarch line, we refer to ourselves as Grand Incas for the most part, but we're all Incas. So the next slide. And just that you don't have to go back to the slide, but just to give more backstory with this image was taken. Also, Carlos Quintos is in this image too. This is just a small part of the actual mural that was painted. So Carlos Quintos was also a quote unquote melanated or a dark-skinned Spaniard that invaded Central America and caused war with our people, with the Incas. And there's a whole history around that. Just wanted to give you some insight. You can do some further research on the invasion of the Incas with the Spaniard conquistadors. And so here we have, so there's a book that I recommend people to read if they want to know more about the different invasions that happen and how these explorers depicted the people and what they looked like and what they saw when they got here. So there's a great book, and you'll see a caption of that book. And this just sort of gives you more insight of what it is. So the information contains invasions from Japan, China, violent storms, Mongols, and elephants. They did come with elephants, and they landed in Peru and in California. Various numerous identifications of the history of Peru and Mexico, and the conquest of the Spaniards. There was much grandeur of our people. So they speak about the grandeur. They speak about Montezuma in this book as well. They talk about the wild elephants that were in America, descriptions of various things in Africa too. They mentioned that the map of the Incas and the Montezuma. There's a lot of, this is all primary source evidence, and it gives explicit information on our phenotypes, our cities, our towns, our villages, our territories, our hotels, our inns, our comedies and tragedies and plays, our roads, our streets, our bridges, clothing, our cultural, from the perspectives, for the most part, as they were often unable to speak our language. So this is their interpretation. So a lot of times they didn't get our, confirmation that some of the things that they assumed were actually accurate. Next slide will be the picture of this this journal. Oh wait, hold on. Okay. So before we get there, the Americas is our ancestral land, as it is in our blood, bones, and sinews. And this was stated by Frederick Douglass in The Folly of Colonization. I encourage people to read that. Frederick Douglass was a congressman. He was in Congress, and there was an asserted effort for certain people to remove our people from America to Africa and to send us to any other place that they chose to. It didn't pass in Congress. Ultimately, it was unjust. And so he did talk about that, and he talked about who we are and our people. And we have to understand there's code language that has been used on our people for a very long time. Certain terms such as colored and Negro, and we'll show you primary source evidence in this presentation to show you that too as well. And so some of our people did leave the tribal rule, which is how we determine in our nation and under our law who is actually Aborigine and who was actually in our confederacy and in our nation, right? So he did that folly of colonization on January 9th, 1894. And it was actually his third time certain congressman presenting this idea to him to get him to agree, which he never did. Next slide, please. This is the book that I referenced. And you can go to archives.com. It is a great primary source reference catalog of books that were written from the 13th century all the way up to today. Next slide. So this is the title of the book. It's a very long title. Hopefully you can screen capture it or something. But this is the title of the book: Historical Researches of the Conquest of Peru, Mexico, Bogota, Natchez, and Mexico in the 13th century by the Mongols, accompanied with elephants, and the local agreements of history and traditions with the remains of elephants and mastodons. I may not pronounce that correctly, found in the New World, which they call our world. The Americas, the New World, we refer to it as the Old World. And the author is by John Rankin, March 20th, 1827. Next slide, please. So it's going to talk about the Incas, New Granada, Natchez, Mississippi, Tomeco on the Ohio River. Yes, that's right. It also is a sketch of the history of Anahuac and the 6th century to the year 1523, the sovereigns of Mexico and ancient Mexico and great markets described. Next slide, please. This is an emblem of America. You can find this at the British Museum. You can Google it online, the British Museum online. This is what the people, the explorers that came throughout to the Americas reference who the Americans were. So this is a authentic, authorized etching that was done on. And etching is a certain type of way. So you use a copper plate. You have to etch the image in on the plate, and there's a whole process. So this is a primary source that has been shown all over the world. This is the image of an American woman during that time. And don't quote me. I do think I do have it in the next slide, though. The year that this was painted or etched would have been in the 17th century. Next slide, please. Was I close? Was I close with the year? I don't think I put it down in here, but this is a primary source. You can go to the British Museum. Here is the information to get you there. So if you can screenshot that, you could just put that in there. It'll take you directly to the British Museum's collection, and you'll be able to see that and various other beautiful depictions of what the Americans look like. Next slide, please. And what I'm going to talk about now is the context and descriptions of who the Aborigine Americans are, both past and present. Next slide. The Incas are the Onkwe-Onwe, and Onkwe-Onwe means original beings. That's the only thing we really called ourselves, was Onkwe-Onwe or Rotanasoni, Aborigine Americans, and we are the direct lineage of the so-called Olmecs and Mayans and Toltecs. And I did go over that roughly in the beginning. And this is just more information on how we face continued marginalization and discrimination more than any citizen population upon our lands here in the Americas. And that's a problem because we have a right to exist. And we also, those of our people who have forgotten who they are, have a right to return to our nation. And that is supported by constitutional law and international law too. We've experienced dispossession of our lands and resources, displacement of our people, as well as physical and paper genocide, forced assimilation. And we've been left out of the most important discussions. I just want to reiterate that that's the point of this presentation, is to educate people and to, see those who feel, encouraged to work with us, so that we stop the genocide of Aborigine people, and we stop the forced assimilation as well. 1798, the Grand Inca's in the house, and she's reminding me that it's 1798 emblem of America. Next slide, please. So here, and I don't know if you can scroll out, that's why I did 3 particular images. So this is the Delaware Treaty and the map of the Delawares. And in this map, which the Delaware region or territory includes New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and parts of Virginia too, and Virginia as well. And so if you'll notice, this is the first is the image of the map itself, right? And then when you glean into the map, you'll see different names that sound like they're indigenous names of different areas that have now been renamed. So the middle picture shows the Aborigines meeting with the Europeans, and looks like a peaceful transaction is happening. There's some trading of some goods of some sort. What I really want people to hone in on is the third image. And if you look at the third image, you can clearly see distinction in particular characteristics. Notice the curly hair, the curly kind of Afro-ish style hair that our people are known to have, curly, tight, or loose curly type hair that our people are known to have. So there's a lot of primary sources that show pictures, depictions of who the Aborigine people are. So there is no confusion, and this is not debatable, and it's not even questionable. Congress agrees. International world courts also agree who we are. Next slide, please. Just wanted to give honor to Frederick Douglass for The Folly of Colonization, and I encourage people to read that and glean into what he is saying. And I must remind you, there will be code language there, and we'll talk about what color it is, it means, what Negro is, and those kinds of things. Next slide, please. So we have been on our land since time immemorial, which is defined as old beyond memory. And we have a deep spiritual and physical connections to our lands, our animals, our elements, nature, and the universe. And our ways of dealing with these types of changes are in our blood, bones, and sinews, as Frederick Douglass stated in The Folly of Colonization. This is a time now for people to 1894, Grand Ynga, thank you, who is also watching, noted in the chat, 1894 is the year that he had written this. Oh, I do have it there at the bottom. Thank you, Grand Ynga. Next slide, please. I meant to make this white and I didn't. So I'm going to put my face real close to the screen here for a moment. So with the Ongwe-Ongwe's advanced knowledge of the universe, we traveled the world. We traveled the Americas and the world. And during 600 BC, our people were exploring most parts of the Mississippi River, developing relationship with our other people who are also Ongwe, Aborigine American, and the culture there. And we had a lot of similarities. In the lower Mississippi, genealogy and history connect the Ongwe Mayan language to the foundation for Louisiana's indigenous languages, and many words still remain to this day. The two most common pronunciations, Bia or Baya, Bia, and Biu, now say Valoid or Vala. Spaniards have mixed in with our language and kind of influenced the language too. You'll still hear a lot of words that are similar to Mayan words too as well. So the Bayou Manchac connects the Mississippi River and the Amite River, which just happens to lie to the east of the Mississippi. The sense of connecting the Choctaw language, quote unquote, and many others here throughout the Americas. Northeast Louisiana, Chatula Parish, Louisiana is a town in Johnsville. In particular, the location of the Troyville earthworks, at which point is the stamp of the Yucatan. Yucatan is also in the Americas, and there's a connection between the Yucatans. They're here as well, which can easily be seen by anyone who's ever lived there. If you travel up the Mississippi River from Jonesville, there are many false rivers that were once part of the Mississippi River, which is now cut off. The river, after the river had changed some course. At the present time, the tributaries are lakes, and some of these are one which is called the Yucatan Lake. So you can see the connections from Central America, South America, and here in the mainland, which we call North America. And a lot of this information, like Poverty Point, was built in 17th century and in the 11th century, which is now a World Heritage Site. So the Ongwe-Ongwe's have been all throughout the Americas, and there's a lot of information, primary sources in the Appalachian Mountains to the east as well. Next slide, please. So Ongwe-Ongwe are we as the indigenous Aborigines peoples. There's evidence of us stewarding lands in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee. A lot of observations have been done, and there's been a lot of connections between the mounds in Wisconsin and the ones in Mexico. We'll see the influence of our people in ancient America when many visit Georgia, about an hour north of Atlanta, in the Etowah mounds. Many of the Etowah's people artifacts are located in a museum nearby there, and there's millions on display with numerous Mayan characteristics, right? So there's no question that these are the same people. We are the same people. We are the Ongwe-Ongwe. The Okmulgee mounds artwork, and I may have mispronounced that, are also displayed in Macon. And now archaeologists admit to our influence here. Not only that, when traveling to Alabama or to South Florida will lead you to overwhelming numbers of mounds attached to villages and Mayan-like artifacts. Next slide, please. So who are the Ynga-Onweys of North America? Now we're going to get into some law. So the Ynga-Onwe Aborigine Americans are a distinct people governed by the Ynga-hal-makina, which is our great law of peace, which is our Constitution, which is the foundation and the development of the United States Constitution. There's a website that you can check that out and gain some more information on that. The Great Law of Peace and the United States Constitution, when compared side by side, irrefutably connected. Congress has already acknowledged this too as well, and I'll speak about that. So the Constitution is clear about who we, the Aborigine American Indians, are in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, in a phrase, and excluding Indians not taxed. Next slide, please. And who are these Indians not taxed? Well, we'll talk about that. And this is after the preamble, where it states the representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers. Now they're talking about who these people are to be taxed and who are not to be taxed, charged, assessed, enumerated, those kinds of things, which shall be determined by adding the whole number of free persons. This does not mean someone who was freed from slavery necessarily. It is more in line with someone who is not in a particular contract, including those bound to service for a term of years. That would be people who are in a contract. You have a job, work for the government, employment, those are considered contracts. And then there is exclude, or prison too, jail is considered a contract too as well. And excluding Indians not taxed. So we are excluded out of this number that they're talking of. And then 3/5 of all other persons. There's been a lot of confusion and misperception on what persons, or 3/5, I should say, of all other persons. And it doesn't mean someone who is considered less than a human. It actually is referring to businesses, entities, corporations with a capital P. They have been given the right to be taxed and to sue and to be sued, just like quote unquote persons are. So to be clear, the Bouvier's dictionary, which if you want to read the Constitution and understand the terms that are used in the Constitution, there's a dictionary for everything. Like if you're a heart surgeon and heart medicine, there's a dictionary for that. If you're, a chemist, there's dictionaries for the terms that chemists use. So there's also dictionaries for the terms that are used within the Constitution, because there's a disconnect in language. So there's connotative language, which is slang. Like when someone says, I'm going to the crib, they're not going to actually go into a stable, right? They're going to go home. That's connotative. Denotative is what the word actually means in that particular situation. And so the Bouvier's dictionary gives us a clear definition, meaning what they're referring to when they say Indians in this, and excluding Indians not taxed. And their definition is Indians are the Aborigines of this country, are so-called. And you can word that backwards and say the so-called Indians are the Aborigines of this country. Next slide, please. I think I'm getting through it pretty good. All right. An etymology dictionary in the Webster's Dictionary, 1828, defines American as an American in 1570. Originally, one of the Aboriginal peoples discovered in the Western Hemisphere by Europeans. From modern Latin Americanus, from America, the original sense is now Native Americans, the sense of resident of North American, of European, originally British descent. Now, what that is explaining is that initially, the American, that term was referred and applied specifically solely to Aborigine people of the Americas. And as a point in history, it was given to Europeans of British descent. They were given that classification of Native Americans. And there's a very specific history that goes along with that. I'm moving quickly though. So we're going to stay focused on who we are, it's the Aborigines. So we are the original Americans in the Webster's Dictionary, 1828, describes our people as American, adjective, pertaining to America, American, noun, a native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here. And I disqualify that by saying you can't find the people, but you can meet them. So met here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. The name of American must always exalt the pride of patriotism. And that is a quote by George Washington. Next slide, please. Forced assimilation and genocide in the 1800s and the separation from tribal rule. According to our culture and our great law of peace, race as a designation does not apply to our people. The Ongwe Aborigine American and excluding Indians not taxed, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the Constitution, as well as supported by the ADRIP and the UNDRIP. That was the 1856 Bouvier's dictionary. Thank you, Grand Ynga Ikhana. And we have never referred to ourselves as a race. We consider ourselves, and history has supported this, and Congress and international bodies of law agree. We've called ourselves the Ongwe. We are the original beings of the Americas. And many of our people who did not renounce our tribal rule, some did. A lot of it was through forced assimilation and genocide that a lot of people, our people, forgot who they are. They forgot the history. A lot of us didn't, and a lot of our grandmothers always reminded us that we were Indian. And many knew what quote unquote tribe, because we didn't really, separate ourselves like that. Again, when you hear terms like Cherokee, Choctaw, these terms that a lot of our people do gravitate towards. Again, remember, we've been reclassified, renamed. These are actually French words and Dutch words and English words and Portuguese words and Spanish words. When you understand the true history of how these terms began to be labeled upon our peoples. All right, next slide, please. We talked about Article 1. We're going to click to the next slide. We don't need to look at that one. Oh, actually, we do. Go back. So this is referring to the instructions to the marshals, right? And when we talk about our people are not to be taxed, or we're excluded from tax, I want to be clear with the words because it's very important. Words matter, especially in law and life in general. In the 1850 census, it was clear that Indians not taxed are not to be enumerated in this or any other schedule. So we were never to be on census records, census forms. We were never to be in any government data, website, database, any of those things. And that's another reason why a lot of people don't know we exist and that we are still here, because we are not citizens of our own land. We're not foreigners and we're not immigrants on our own land. So with that being said, we are outside of those statistics that are usually calculated in that way. We have our own way of knowing who we are. Next slide, please. So how did our people and our land become dispossessed? How did we become dispossessed from our land? So we experienced a lot of Indian wars on our lands. There were thousands of battles of wars that were fought all over our lands, from South America, Central America, North America, and all of the adjoining islands. That is all the Americas, as far up as Greenland and down to Canada. So we've been in a lot of wars, and these wars were horrific for our people, displaced us, dispossessed us of our ancestral lands, presented not only devastating effects on our people spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically, it also disconnected us from our ancient methods of land stewardship and culture. And we are reviving those things. A lot of us did and still have kept the knowledge. It was passed down from generation to generation. And now we are, we're educating the world through our own account of who we are and the primary sources that we have to show the people who we are. And we need to do this because of this direct colonialism and colonization. We need to address it to repair, restore our people, ourselves, and our future 7-span generations. Next slide, please. So this is just a list of the various Indian wars. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll just mention a couple. 17th century, Jamestown Massacre, March 22nd, 1622, the Pequot War, 1663 to 37, the Beaver War, King William's War, Queen Anne's War, Yamasee War, Lord Dunmore's War, the American Revolution era, Chickamauga, Cherokee Wars. It just goes on and on and on. And there's a link here at the bottom, and you can explore that and educate yourself more on that. Since we have limited time, I won't go further into detail. The next slide, please. Unconstitutional acts against our people and land dispossession. So there were a lot of acts that were created to dispossess our people. The Indian Removal Act was signed into law by President Andrew Jackson on May 28, 1830, authorizing the president at that time to grant lands west of the Mississippi in exchange for our lands within existing quote unquote state borders. 1851, originally Congress created reservations to manage a lot of our people who were dispossessed, displaced, kidnapped. There's a lot of things that happen, human trafficked, child trafficked, a whole host of things. We don't really refer to ourselves as humans, but we're using terms that are used in today's language that people can really understand what that means. Congress passed an Indian Appropriations Act, creating the reservation system as it were. Next slide, please. The Indian Act, the Land Grant College Act of 1862, otherwise known as the Morrill Act of the U.S. Congress, which it was enacted during the Civil War, and it provided that any adult citizen, listen to these words very carefully, intended citizen, or who was born who never bore arms against the United States government could claim land on our land that we never acknowledged or sold, because in our great law of peace, we can't sell land and we can't buy land. Our land, we're just heirs and stewards of our land. Next slide, please. So forced assimilation and genocide in the 1800s and the separation from our tribal rule. Eugenics and the paper genocide. Now, earlier I said, certain keywords. These are two of those keywords. Eugenics is a outdated, discredited movement to basically eliminate and genocide people off, our Aborigine people off of our lands. And there was various hosts of ways that genocide happened in the past and ways that it's still continuing today. I don't have time to go into that, so we'll focus on paper genocide for now. In 1924, Walter Ashby Plecker, creator of the Racial Integrity Act, since repealed, it's been repealed as unlawful. But Walter Ashby Plecker was a physician and the first Virginia state registrar of vital statistics, a position he served in from 1912 to 1946. He was a staunch promoter of eugenics, a discredited movement aimed at scientifically proving white racial superiority and thereby justifying the marginalization or marginalizing of non-white people. Employing Virginia's Act to preserve racial integrity, 1924. Plecker effectively separated Virginia citizens into two simplified, quote unquote, racial categories, white and colored. The law, which remained in effect until 1967, when it was overturned by the United States Supreme Court in the case of Loving versus Virginia, which required then that racial description of every person be recorded at birth. Next slide. So this birth certificate situation, I'm just going to go into that because I don't have it here on the presentation. The birth certificate was created as a form of genocide against Aborigine Indigenous people. That would reclassify our people, taking us out of our own, what we've accepted and what we had accepted as Indian, into what would have become colored. From colored, there became other terms, and we're going to talk about that, asserting that Virginia Indians were in fact mixed-blooded Negroes. And Negro is a synonym for Aborigine American Indian. There's many primary sources. This is not debatable. It is debatable. People can debate, although the truth is the truth and the truth stands on its own. Plecker also pressured state agencies into reclassifying our people into this colored term. And the policy's legacy, there's no single, let me just see what that is. Thank you, thank you. Let me say what the Grand Ynga of our nation said. There is no single source to find our history. It's been hidden and scattered throughout various historical documents. And you must know what you're looking for to find us throughout historical documents. I'll let you read her post from there. Thank you, Grand Ynga, which I get to at the end, and I'm glad she brought that up right now. It's a great segue into that. Our history is vast. And this is thus the title of Aborigine Americans Hidden in Plain Sight no longer, because it is up to us. And we are in the forefront of educating people on who we are on our lands, and also working within the guise of constitutional law and Aborigine law, international law, the responsibility of the municipal authorities and the educational systems to also be knowledgeable. So it will be for us to teach them who we are, and then for curriculums to be set in place. We have a curriculum already, and that is an ultimate goal, to have our curriculum in the educational system from K through collegiate level, because people are on our land, and as if we are not here making decisions without our free and prior informed consent, which is also a protected right of ours. And for our consent to be included, people would have to know who we are. And unless you know how to research, where to look, it'll point you back to a lot of misinformation, a lot of whitewashing, a lot of changing of our images through recent paintings and pictures and things like that. And so it is our responsibility. And I'm here with this presentation to educate, inform, to enlighten, and for those who wish to ally, to make those connections. Next slide, please. There's the Indian Reorganization Act. It just goes on and on and on. So I'm not going to go into this slide because we did touch on how these acts are the main reason why we have been we've been dispossessed of our land. Next slide, please. So the American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the member states of the Organization of American States, also hereinafter states, recognizing the rights of Indigenous peoples, are both essential in historical significance to the present and future of the Americas. The important presence in the Americas of our people and our immense contribution to the development, plurality, and cultural diversity, and reiterating our commitment to our economic and social well-being, and their commitment to us, as well as their obligation to respect our rights, cultural identity, and the existence of our people's cultures and peoples and throughout the Americas. It's very important to humanity. Now, the Organization of American States is a body that was created by our ancestors, and it includes a lot of people who don't quite look like us, and some that outright don't look like us. Nonetheless, the organization is the oldest organization of the Americas in history. And this organization, which United States of America is a member of, and they are a body that overlooks and does oversight on the ill treatments of Aborigine American people, as well as there's the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People that also does that as well for Indigenous people and other populations. Next slide, please. I'm actually going to make it. So the entire world governments know who we are and are bound by laws and the rights. OAS is the oldest in the world. Yes, indeed, Grand Ynga. Oh, wait, again, just let me get back to, okay, who we are and are bound by the laws and the rights of our people. The American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People are very clear on who we are. And these first three articles I felt were really relevant to just go over real briefly. The Article 1, the American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples applies to the Indigenous peoples of the Americas. And self-identification as Indigenous peoples will be the fundamental criteria for determining to whom this declaration applies. States shall respect the right of such self-identification as Indigenous, whether individually, whether we are standing as one, our own self, or collectively as a nation, in keeping with the practices and institutions of our people. Article 2, states recognize and respect the multicultural, multilingual character of our people and who are an integral part of our own societies. And in Article 3, our people have the right to self-determination. By virtue of that right, we freely determine our political status and we freely pursue our economic, social, and cultural development. Next slide, please. Now here are, I'm just going to read over the articles without reading the description of them. These are the other articles that are in the American Declarations. We call it the ADRIP for short. Article 4, full effect and observance of our rights. Article 5, collective rights. Article 6, gender equality. I think I'm saying that was Article 7. Article 8, right to belong to our people. The next article, judicial personality, rejection of assimilation, protection against genocide, guarantees against racism and racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerances, right to our cultural identity and integrity, systems of knowledge, language, and communication, our own, education, our way of educating ourselves and educating the world on who we are, Indigenous spirituality, our family, which we don't use the term family, we do say lineage, which is direct bloodline, our health, our right to protection of a healthy environment. We have a right for our land to be healthy so that we can thrive on our lands. Organizational and political rights. We can form our own type of those types of structures. Our rights of association, assembly, and freedom of expression and thought. Our right to autonomy of self-governing ourselves, Indigenous law and jurisdiction, participation of our peoples and contribution of our legal and organizational systems, our treaties, our agreements, our constructive agreements, social, economic, and property rights, traditional forms of property and cultural survival, our right to our land, territory, and our resources. Our people have a right to voluntarily isolate ourselves or have initial contact. Our labor rights, our protection of our cultural heritage and intellectual property, our right to development, and our right to peace, security, and protection. And these things are very important and critical, these things that are mentioned here, because we are being excluded out of our rights in these ways. And this is unlawful and it is punishable here as well as international. You know, genocide is a punishable act. Forced assimilation is a punishable act. You know, these are all unlawful acts. And a lot of time we find ourselves being targets of the color of law, which is not constitutional. And the color of law does not supersede constitutional law or international law. And these are the things that we strive to enforce so that our future generations no longer will have to face fear of forced assimilation or genocide. The next two slides will be images of these very people that I've been speaking about in this presentation thus far. So this first image is a stone statue we created ourselves. It's considered a Mayan statue. And when you look at these things, I want you to look at features. I want you to, pay attention to phenotype. And then think about people that you see walking through the Americas. And let's focus on Pittsburgh, because there are a lot of us here. The second image, and because it's so small, I can't really read it that well. But this is another sculpture of a woman considered a Mayan or Ynga woman, the second image. You have the Mayan terracotta image. I want you to notice the head, the nose, the lips, the cheek structure, the hair, which is painted on. And then we have some more what people are familiar with looking at as a quote unquote Indian. And this is a sculpture, the next one with the headdress on, the war bonnet headdress, is made in gold and bronze. This next image is a chief. And he is a member, or was, because this is in 1873, what one would call a Crow tribesman. Again, remember these terms: Crow, Crow, Creek, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw. These are terms that will refer to us. And again, there was some acceptance of those terms. We are the Onkwe-Onwe. We are clear on who we are as a people. These first two bottom ones are paintings. These are all in museums too as well. This painting, by the first one by Jonathan Carver, was created in 1781. And this is showing the people of Wisconsin. I think that says Wisconsin. It's really difficult for me to see this slide since I'm not in control of it. I'm trying to see this, where did that say? Thank you so much. Can we push it up a little bit? Yes, thank you. Yes, Wisconsin. Okay, I guess my eyes aren't terrible. The next image, Indians hunting in the Bay of San Francisco. And this is Peru. This next image, who was an activist. He was an activist, Eugenio Monori, in 1861 to 1865. And in 1862, he opened a luxury studio, also in Lima, Peru. And this last one, Arturo Cavero. And these are all, I can give links to where you can go, actually see these, and the other information that goes along with it, is a Peruvian mambo. I think that I can't see the image. Zombo, let me not be disrespectful, be correct, which is a people. They refer to themselves collectively in a part of Peru. Next slide, which will be the last slide. And bringing it up to our images today are more tying us also with the images of the past. This image right here, the very first part, is a part of the Bonaparte murals. And you will see these Mayans or Incas and the depiction of them with locks and the various hair textures that you see commonly with people who may, quote unquote, be mislabeled as Black or Negro or colored or even African American. We never called ourselves any of those terms, but just saying that people will reference us when they see us as those terms, and this is who we are. And that's the point of this presentation, is to make this very, very clear. The next image is a Mayan sculpture, or wooden carved sculpture. And these are all artifacts that you can see images of in various museums throughout the world, or images everywhere. It's in China, it's in Japan, museums over there, it's everywhere. And then this picture here, which is another emblem, quote unquote, of America after the initial image. Right, this is after more colonization happened, and you'll still see the Indian woman, quote unquote, is represented with the image of a curly fro with feathers. And there's a clear distinction on, even in phenotype and color, in this image, who the European is and who the Aborigine, Aborigine American, quote unquote, the Indian, the Onkwe-Onwe. Now, these pictures here were created by Brunius. I know his last name is Brunius. I can't think of the first name. Unfortunately, I apologize for that. Pardon me for that, I should say. Brunius. But if you Google Brunius paintings, wonderful paintings that he created will come up. This first painting is called, if I'm not mistaken, the woman in the woman in the hat, or the Indian woman in the hat, something around those terms. But all of these images in this middle row are Brunius's paintings, and they have clear descriptions of what they are. They're referring to the people of the islands. They make it clear. They may call them the indigenous, they may call them the natives, but they're referring to them being the original beings, the Onkwe-Onwe of these lands. They are wonderful paintings, and you can get copies of them. You can purchase copies of them on various websites. So these last several images, this is also the last image, the first image at the bottom row, because I don't have the depictions written. I can send that to anybody who's interested, and make you aware of where they came from and who's the artist. This is a depiction in the Caribbean islands, or the Caribs. Thank you Augustino Bernias. Thank you, Bella, one of our members of our nation, just informed me. Augustino Bernias. And those are his images, his pictures, his paintings, his etchings. And there's a book here that's listed. I don't speak Dutch. I think this is Dutch. Don't speak Dutch, but here's an image of what they refer to our people in the islands, and as far as phenotype and complexion. And here's a painting of an quote unquote Indian war. And I make note of the phenotypes, the complexion, the hues of the people who are fighting, and their garb that they have on, and you can make a distinction on who's who. This final image, I love it because it really pulls together that we are this one people. This is a Mayan sculpture to the right of this last image. And these are locks formed in a very beautiful pattern. And if you see women, our women, Aborigine women, Indigenous women, you will see we wear these patterns. You can see us in a lot of fashion shows, even today. Like, it's just amazing. Our culture is within us, even though many of us have forgotten what that is, what our culture is. We are remembering, and we are regathering our primary sources that are connecting us back to our lands. I will say this as I end this part of the presentation. Our grandmothers told us never to forget. We are the Indians. We are the Ongwe. We are the original beings. We are the people of the land, and we have always been here since time immemorial. Thank you so much, everyone who stayed long enough to hear the entire presentation. Thank you for dealing with the issues, the technical difficulties in the beginning. And if I wasn't able to look into the chat, I'll do that now. How can we connect with you? Great. If you would like to assist us and helping us get our word out, get the truth out, and let people know who we are and work with us and assist us in healing our land and our resources, you can reach me at Shaman, SHAMAN, Pomaj, POMAJICAAP @gmail.com. Oh, great. It's in there. And I also want to say I am not only a medicine matriarch for our nation, which I have been, and there are many of us in our nation who are medicine matriarchs. I also have a healing space that I've had in East Liberty for roughly 15 years. It's called Cultural Oasis, and we are the only Aborigine Indigenous apothecary and healing space in the city of Pittsburgh, and actually in the state of Pennsylvania. And we have been servicing all people, helping them to understand how to use medicinal herbs, how to use nature, how to use the elements to heal themselves. I've helped and I've assisted people in healing themselves from so many things, from eczema to cancer, and that's not a joke. Autoimmune issues, things of that nature. Also mental, spiritual issues, just helping them to connect back with their inner self, right? Their soul being, and working with the environment. I am the co-chair of the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council's Urban Agricultural Working Group. I also am a founding steering member of the Three Rivers Agricultural Land Initiative, and we help to protect spaces and make them green spaces so people can grow food on them. I have fought for policy changes as it relates to urban agriculture in inner cities to help communities have access to funds so that they can grow food and feed themselves. I also worked with other farming organizations in my past. I've worked for all people from all walks. This walk is very unique and special to me because this is the walk for my life. This is a walk for my future generations' life. So in that, I've also assisted other people. I've worked in the community of people who identify as Black and African American. I've worked with people who identify as white, for people who identify just as human beings, and assisting to make this land a better land. And I'm not selfish when I say this. I have to be full transparency. I'm doing this because I want, and we want collectively as Aborigine people, for our lands to be respected and for our lands to be healed from all of the devastation and damage that has been done from mining and steel industry and fracking. And it goes on and digging our lands up and putting pipes that now have to be repurposed, and just so much has been done, and from chemtrails being sprayed on our lands. We know what's going on, right? Poisoned water, lead in our water, geoengineered foods. There's so much that did not exist on our lands, and we lived on our lands since time immemorial, one with the land. That's why when everyone who is now considered an immigrant here on our lands, when their ancestors came, they were amazed at how beautiful our land was. And not only that, we didn't have a judicial system, that we worked one. We didn't have commerce. You'll never find a Mayan, an Incan, a Toltec coin. We didn't do commerce. What we did do was everyone had a gift. Everyone was created to do something purposeful. And we helped each other to live up to those expectations, to live their purpose, and we shared everything. So yeah, when you see Mayan images of the marketplace, check out images of the Mayan marketplace. You'll see no money changing hands, quote unquote, money changing hands. You'll see people sharing and giving back and forth. If you were a seamstress and you liked to make clothes, that's what you did. And you just did it. And people would get your things. And somebody liked to bake, you would get, we would share, we would bring our things we made to the marketplace. And to get back to that and creating food forestries, areas where there's free produce that the people can eat. Of course, there has to be a system in place. People take too much sometimes. These are the things that we are looking to do: clean our water, clean our air, clean our soil, have food growing abundantly. When we grew up on our lands here, and I can say personally for myself, there were fruit trees that grew everywhere. When I say everywhere, Homewood, East Liberty, Larmer, Garfield, I can go on and on. Fruit trees. We'd walk to school and pull fruit off the trees. There were berries, wild berries growing everywhere, strawberry patches, right? There were herbs, rosemary, stuff grew everywhere, right? So I'm also a member of the Negley Run Watershed Task Force, and we are working with PWSA to address the issues of water runoff, flooding, and basements. If anybody lives in the Lincoln, Leamington, East Liberty, Homewood, Highland Park, Negley Run, just Google word Negley Run, and you're having issues, reach out to me at that email too. Let me know if you've had flooded basements, if you've noticed streets that have collapsed after heavy rains, or puddles that collect at corners, things like that. We are working to address the issues on our lands. And like I said, I'm an ambassador for the PWSA Watershed Task Force initiative. And I can be reached at 412-362-1611 if anyone's interested in medicinal services or healing services, or just want to buy some herbs, because we carry a little over 400 herbs inside our healing space too as well. You're welcome to call that number, and my daughter will kindly take a call if you're interested in any services that I provide, consultations, those things. I'm a Reiki master too as well. Anything that I do, you're welcome to call that number and schedule with me. And I hope to see some people soon. Any questions? I am done. Looking for my co-host.
We were just looking, and I feel like you addressed all of the questions in the chat as you were going.
Oh,
very impressive.
That's great. That's great. Am I on time? Did I finish on time?
Absolutely perfect. We even have a few minutes if anybody wants to say any questions out loud, and then we will also post that end of the session survey as well.
Much gratitude, everyone. Much gratitude. I'm very graciously excited and appreciative. Yay. I look forward to connecting with you too. I'm just reading the chats. They're just popping up. You're very welcome. You're so welcome. Our story must be told again. Thank you. I see people are leaving, so I guess, yeah, people stayed. I'm happy. I'm excited.
Someone in the chat did ask, what was the name of your healing space again?
Okay, and I think a Grand Ynga put it in there. It's Cultural Oasis. And it's at 100 Sheridan Square or Sheridan Avenue in East Liberty. as if you know Ed Gainey's office where it used to be in East Liberty Development, where their office used to be, we're there right around the corner from a store called Jamil's, right in East Liberty, right down from Target. Oh, you're a teacher. Wonderful. Oh, I appreciate you so much. I just did a lecture with Patricia DeMarco at Chatham University. I taught her policy class. I did policy with her. So I'm really excited. Sure, reach out to me. Please do so. So I guess this is awkward silence. How can people be able to trace back their lineage? Wonderful question. So the question in the chat was, how can people trace back their lineage? This is what we encourage everyone to do. You start with, we are a matriarchal people. And so thank you, reach out, indeed, RWB. So we're a matriarchal people. So our lineage is traced through our mother's line. And so it would be, basically our genocide happened on paper. So if your people, left a tribal rule, however they left it, there'll be a record of it. It'll be on the birth certificate or the death certificate of the mother. You would trace through your mother's lineage and go back as far to her mother's mother, as far back as you can. I suggest death records, birth records, marriage licenses, marriage certificates, war records. This information is available. You may have to go to the state that your mother was born in if she wasn't. And we don't consider ourselves being born. That is a term. It's a legal term that means you're a citizen of the United States, or you're in census records. Thank you, Grand Ynga, Ikhana-hal-makina, census records. So you would have to look through your mother's line. Like I said, you can look on your father's line, but you would have to look at his mother. So not the father and his father, because none of the fathers are related to each other, but every mother is related to her mother and mother's mother's mother. So those are some key ways. And start with asking your grandmothers or the elders in your lineage who are still alive. Like, a lot of them remember and have the history. There was a concerted effort to stop us from referring to ourselves as Onwe, then to stop us from referring to ourselves as Aborigines, and then to stop us from referring to ourselves as Indian when we kind of, accepted or agreed to that term. That's where the problem lies. So when you see birth records of your grandmothers and great grandmothers, and it says Negro, it says colored, it may say Black, but I doubt it. That will be more recent after the 1960s, like early 1970s is when that term came into existence on, documents and things of that nature. So you would have to look for those keywords that are terms of genocide. And yeah, pretty much. But you're welcome to reach out and come to our classes. We do have a class, free conference call. You can reach out to me. I didn't put it in chat, didn't think about that. But we have classes for people who are interested in hearing more of our history, to see if this is who you are. Aborigine _Americans at freeconferencecall.com. And if you reach out to me, I'll send you the link to anybody who's interested. Now, our class is dedicated for Aborigines, and we speak candidly and we speak honestly and truthfully, and it's not a pretty story. It's not a pretty story of the genocide that's still happening today. Our children being taken off of us, harassment, discrimination. Eugenics is everything that's on our land. We have to view everything on our land as eugenics, because it has been initially and intentionally placed to destroy us. Now, I will tell you, I didn't say this in the initial presentation because I just didn't think about it. The Colonization Society is a good place to do some research. Just Google the Colonization Society and you'll glean into some information that the Colonization Society was set up and duly established to remove Aborigine Americans, quote unquote, Indians, off of our lands to some other lands like Liberia, like Sierra Leone. Those were United States territories that were set up. And they did send a lot of our ancestors over there. And some of them went willingly because they had already been well indoctrinated to think that they came from Africa. We are not Africans, and we have not ever stated that we are Africans. We are two distinct, different people, and it is time now to honor and respect that. We do not tell anybody how to identify. If somebody who looks like me says that they're African or they're African American or they're Black or they're from Africa or they have African ancestry, that is not for me to question. And since that is not for me to question, nor would I choose to be disrespectful in that manner, no one has a right to question us when we tell people who we are, for we know who we are, and our grandmothers were sure and certain, and they did tell us the history. A lot of it was told quietly because they were persecuted in the past for saying that. A lot of times, in order for them to vote on things that were happening on our lands, in particular in New York and New Jersey, there were certain quote unquote tribes of Aborigine Indigenous people that were told you can't vote. If you do want to vote, you have to put down Indian, you have to put down colored or Negro. You can't put down that you're an Indian if you want to vote. So we're not, because we're not a part of that system, although we have the first sovereign right on our land for our lands to be governed or stewarded, like I would normally say, according to how we choose to do that based on our own culture. So I thank everyone who is willing to really learn more, to know more about who we are, and to know what the great history that we have on all throughout the Americas. We helped everyone that came here initially, and we were betrayed. And, so that betrayal runs very, very deep. And, then we were mislabeled and we were reclassified. And then other people were given our identity in paintings. I'll say paintings. There's no artifacts though. There's no ancient artifacts with those phenotypes of people who have been painted to be us. Everywhere you look throughout all of the Mayan, Ynga, Toltec, Mexico artifacts, you will see our phenotype. You will see women that look like me, look like my children, my grandmothers, my brothers, my uncles, my cousins, and all of our lineage who are the Aborigines. We share a lot of phenotype features